Illustrative tattoos, yeah. Illustrative tattoos, yeah. Illustrative tattoos, yeah. This is vodka. I still have to draw tonight for a tattoo tomorrow. Hey, welcome to the Fireside Tattoo Network, Tattoo Podcast, Tattoo Experience. Let me put on my glasses. These are not anti-glare, but I do love them. I like that they're clear. So I'm really excited to jump back in on this illustrative tattooing series that we've been working on for the last 6 or 8 months. I've been interested in storytelling in tattooing and in creating a narrative. And then the more that I've interviewed people and the more that I've kind of played with this idea on my own, I love when there's an obvious narrative and then there's kind of underlying narratives. And I just love diving deeper into people who learning from people who are really, really good at this kind of stuff. And today I hit myself an old Grand Slam. That's what I like to call it, the Grand Slam. I got Jesse Smith on the show. I was lucky enough to spend a little time with Jesse and his family at the Paradise Byob last October, a couple of months ago, where we both taught seminars, and I was able to sit in on Jesse's seminar, and he started talking about his process and how he had created this world, this kind of imaginary world where all of his creatures live. And he made it so believable that I started to believe that the island that he was talking about was an actual place. And he had to correct me and tell me that no, it's all invented. But he was so convincing that it was this island where the government was doing, different governments were collaborating and doing experiments on animals, and all these hybrid animals started coming out. And I was like, man, you have to jump in and be a part of this illustrative series. So that is a lot of what we spend this episode talking about, is kind of Jesse's process. And if you know Jesse's work, it's kind of a new school style. But it's got such a narrative. His characters have a lot of personality, and they have you want to learn a little more about them. They're always in crazy predicaments or situations or environments where you can't exactly tell what's happening. And I love that about his work. Aside from that, Jesse's just one of my favorite people. He's just a really great guy, easy to talk to. We're very similar personalities. So any chance I get to sit down and talk to him, I will absolutely take it. If at the end of the episode you'd like to learn more about Jesse's process, about what all he does, we actually recorded his entire workshop or seminar. It was a 3-part seminar. And it is available on Guy Aitchison's Reinventing the Tattoo. I'll drop a link to that. I don't know the cost of it. It's probably, I think, around $100 or something like that. But it's a 3-hour seminar. Really, really good. He goes from his background through his process. He does a whole thing on color theory, and he's got some really interesting color palettes, and the way that he uses color is really, really unique. So just that in itself is well worth the $100. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you for supporting what we do, and let's get started. Welcome to the Fireside Tattoo Podcast, the official podcast of the Fireside Tattoo Network. I'm Jake Meeks. This is Jesse Smith. We already went through all this, but Jesse's mic wasn't working, so we're not going to repeat it all. So we're here at the Paradise Byob. This is the last day. Jesse just finished an awesome 3-part seminar. How many times have you done that seminar?
I've probably done it 10 times or so. Yeah. I mean, I always add stuff every time, so.
Yeah.
It's a little longer.
Do you ever take stuff out?
Yes, I try to. Yeah. I think the first part's a little too long, so I'll probably pare that down a little bit.
Oh, really? Yeah. I think a lot of people like that, especially a lot. I learned a lot. I didn't know that you worked with bugs. That's crazy. Yeah. I can remember flipping through tattoo magazines back, in the 90s, and he looked like he didn't, you're flipping through and you see pretty consistent stuff, and then this crazy Cubist Picasso looking thing on a whole back pops up with just crazy color, and you're like, what is that guy doing? It's the craziest, most off the wall thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, the crazy thing is before that he was doing Celtic. He was called the Celtic King.
Really?
So he'd do these big old Celtic neck arm things. And I remember when I worked for him, he would show me all these magazine articles, and I was like, damn, man, you really want to do that much Celtic? He's like, nope, that's why I switched styles.
Holy crap, that's crazy. I don't know that I ever saw any of his Celtic work. All right, so I'll get to it because I know you have to fly out here in just a little while. What I've been trying to do here lately, what I've reached out to you before about, is this kind of storytelling through tattooing, right? You can start wherever you want, but I thought the idea that you had created like a world at some point in your work so that you could keep yourself interested was really like an awesome idea. Yeah. So I'll let you go with it. I don't know if it makes more sense to start from maybe before and how you did, how you came to create this world. I can't pronounce names. Carcass. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit odd name. About 2008 or so, I think it was 2008, somewhere in there, I just kind of got bored of just tattooing normal things. And I was doing a lot of squirrels back then. So everybody would come in and be like, I want a squirrel. So I'm thinking of all these different ways to do squirrels. And eventually I was just like, man, I really would like, they get a squirrel and then they walk out the door and that was it. So I was like, I'd really like to add a little more depth to my work and try to figure out a way to kind of like just, give it more meaning. And the funny thing is I'd been thinking about this. Me and my buddy Jason went down to Disney World. I think it's Disney World or Universal Studios, whatever one Dr. Seuss is in. And I remember riding around on the Dr. Seuss roller coaster and I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to create a world where all these characters can live. And so I went back up and I started writing stories and started kind of creating this lore per se. And I was also thinking about, Japanese tattoos or Asian style tattoos. It's like they have this, there's a reason for it. You get this, Chinese dragon with 3 claws and it goes over and gets 4 claws. I don't remember the logistics of it, but there's reasons for why they're doing that. And I didn't really have that. It was just like, I'm not doing any of this for any reason. So then it was good to kind of like build those boundaries for myself. Like what's happening on this continent? Why are these characters the way they are? And then having a little bit of understanding on what I was going to put together and how it should feel and all that stuff. And then I just always thought it was cool that, one client could have one character that interacts with another client. They don't even know each other. They're just their clients work together.
Yeah.
So I just thought it added more flavor to it.
Yeah. So, well, maybe go through and explain what like you did in the seminar, like what Carcass is. Like it's just like it has a geographic location.
Yeah.
So what is the world?
So essentially, Carcass is a fictitious continent that's located off the east coast of the Galapagos Islands. The reason I chose that area is because I'm sure you've read about this or heard about it. Like the Galapagos Islands has almost its own ecosystem with animals, and that's where Darwin figured out that evolution existed and all that stuff. That's where his theory came from. So I was like, man, how can I take that a little bit further? And it's like once you get out a little bit further, shit gets even crazier. And maybe my world has bled into the Galapagos Islands, and that's why there's a weirder ecosystem there than there is anywhere else. But so the story goes, I was doing a tattoo convention down in Ecuador, and I went over to the Galapagos Islands because I always wanted to see them. While I was over there, I stumbled across this local, and he was like, "Yeah, you want to see some real crazy stuff?" And he ended up taking me out to Carcass. So I went out to Carcass, and I just started drawing. I mean, the cell phones didn't work, cameras didn't work, nothing. So I just started drawing everything, and that's what has made it back to the U.S. and into my world. Is all these drawings I did while I was there. And throughout time, I've gone back and visited Carcass multiple times, brought other people with me. But it's a place that used to be owned by the government, by the world government, and pharmaceutical companies. And what they would do is they would actually experiment on animals and all the local habitat or the local animals and stuff. And then the animals just started getting real weird and twisted and crazy looking. And then they dipped out, I think 20 years ago or so, they dipped out. And, the reason why none of us know about it is because they never put it on the maps. They didn't want us to know. So, I'm trying to tell the world that it exists and that what happened.
I completely missed that in your seminar. I thought when you went through all that, I thought you invented this place. And you were saying, in my mind, it's a place where all these scientists were and all that kind of stuff. Like, not that it was a legit place.
It's not a legit.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. I heard it right the first time. Okay. All right. Yeah. Good.
But, and to me, I always I see these people create these worlds, and the worlds don't exist in our world. And as soon as they don't exist in our world, I feel a little more detached from them. Yeah. So when you see, Smurfs or something like that, it's like they're just in a whole different world. So I wanted to figure out a way to create a world that we live in. and it's attached to the world we live in. I always enjoyed those stories better, where it was like you could actually go visit this because it exists, you know. So that's why I kind of kept one foot in reality the entire time. I love that, the ability to potentially find this content if you wanted to.
Yeah. Do your clients know any of the background of the characters, or do they still just kind of come in for the kind of characters that people know you for? Do you share the stories?
I usually try to talk to them about it. I want them to understand. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm drawing this character and it's going to be, you know, the gay lover to this other character, and then all of a sudden they find out when I put it on my Instagram and they're like, I hit it, you know. Whatever their thoughts are on the stories I write. But a lot of the stories develop while I'm tattooing them or while I'm drawing on them. So you might come in and be like, hey, I want one of your characters. I'm not just going to start drawing. I'm going to say, well, which one of my characters do you like? What do you like about it? You know, and we'll start talking. I'll say something in the story that kind of like reflects something that happened while we were tattooing. So maybe one of their friends came in and while we were tattooing them and started talking to them and whatever. I'll start talking about, yeah, we were, you know, in Carcass and this, you know, butterfly bat came by and said this or whatever, you know, and I always try to like grab something from the person or the situation and bring it in. It's always very subtle, but the person who I tattoo knows what I'm saying, you know, and I'll completely make it so no one knows except me and my client, which is fun, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So you had mentioned a little bit in your talk that you just hit a point in your career where you needed something new. What was it that needed a reason to like push it a little bit further? I think you mentioned that you'd been in the magazines, you win the new school awards at the shows or whatever else.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, like, I get, I guess, why you do that. Do you think that's something that's pretty unique within tattooing, or like think about your other really great, like high level at something that you do? Think about Victor. You talked about Victor Chill or Timmy B. Do you think they put that same type of kind of thought into the story of their characters? Do you think that's something that's pretty unique to you? Maybe let's just stick with your style of tattooing and that kind of newer school style or whatever.
I think it's unique to me as far as I know. I don't know anybody else that does this, but I know a couple that they started doing it, you know, because they were inspired by what I had done. But you know, I think that what happens with probably all artists, and I don't know, I can only speak from my experience, but I've seen other artists do this. So like, you find this style or whatever, and you end up hitting this level, and you get famous or whatever. Then you keep doing that style. The more you do that style, your equity kind of goes down. You know, if you have a band or whatever and they're doing the same music over and over, people just start losing interest. The ones who last the longest are people who just reinvent themselves every time. And I think that, you know, the difference between Timmy and Victor and myself is, you know, Timmy and Victor are a tad bit younger in the tattoo world. So I think that as far as I know, and once again, I can't speak for them, but I would assume that they haven't hit that level or not the level, but they haven't hit that part in their brain where they're just like, okay, I just feel like I need to get to that next level, and how do I do that? You know, and not taking anything away from their art at all. I think those guys are amazing, and I'm super inspired by both of them. But I do think that in order for me to get to that thought process, I had to get bored of my own work to make that happen. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Let's go back to the storytelling. When you're thinking about the elements that you put into the story, you're thinking about Carcass, and you're trying to create the environments. What do you have a kind of a set process of I know you talked a little bit about how you weren't doing backgrounds in your early work, which I don't think a lot of people were. And then when you started working with Bugs, he kind of introduced the idea of backgrounds. So whenever you're planning the characters, is there an order of operations? Do you understand their environment or do you understand the character pretty fully before you know where you're going to put them, or is it all just kind of meld together, mush together?
There's so many different angles, and it just really depends on where my head's at. Like I said, I can see a spot on the wall and then all of a sudden be inspired to do this thing. Or there's other things where I'm like, it'd be really cool to merge these two things together, and then that happens. There's other times where I just get on the paper and just go and see what comes out and then build a story off of that. But a lot of the times I would say that because I'm an illustrator first and barely a story writer second, most of my characters come out visually before they come out, you know, written out. So, and I remember talking to my buddy Jason about this, and he was like, yeah, you're doing it backwards. And I'm like, dude, this is how I work. Like I see things visually, and then I think about the story. And I think a lot of us work that way. When you're looking at Instagram, and you're looking through the photos, you see the photo, and then you get into the story. And I've always been more interested in the visuals than I have the actual story, but I think the story complements the visuals.
Yeah, definitely. We both talked in our seminars this weekend about the importance of drawing out of your head before you start looking at a lot of reference. And I think whenever you're trying to, particularly with storytelling and things like that, to me it seems like stories can only be really super genuine if they start with kind of your natural visual stories, not written stories. If they start with kind of your natural marks rather than building a bank of reference images and trying to hide, trying to like whatever mash something together from a bunch of reference. Maybe talk a little bit about just kind of your design process. Don't you do another seminar that maybe you didn't do that's just about like starting with like, well, maybe it was just a thing you did on reinventing, starting with like blobs and weird shapes and like kind of pulling them together.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like I was saying, my process is kind of all over the place. Sometimes when I was in art school, they were like reference. So I was leaning on that reference for 4 years straight. And by the time I got out of art school, I couldn't draw out of my head anymore. Prior to that, I drew out of my head. And then after being on reference so long, I couldn't do it. And I was like, damn, I don't like this. I want to be able to draw out of my head again. So I forced myself not to use reference. And then I kind of almost relearned. And I realized that when I'm working from reference, it's almost like I'm working from a different part of my brain. And when I'm working from my imagination, it's like another part. And I noticed that if I'm working from reference, my stuff, it's hard for me to bend and tweak it past that point. Whereas that's why I have a lot of respect for Nick Mitchell, because Nick Mitchell, he's looking at someone's face and he's tweaking it out. He's able to use both sides of his brain to make that happen. Whereas me, I almost have to have one or the other on at a time and then bring them together. So that was like with the priming your brain thing, bringing the reference out, drawing it real quick, putting it away, and then drawing it. It's like I'm kind of doing both, but I'm drawing from this side instead of this side.
Yeah.
At least that's how it feels in my brain.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's almost like it's almost like, think about when you put up like the part about on your seminar about running 5 businesses. The thing that I always struggle with dealing with, say, with something in real estate, and then I'm on my way to the tattoo shop, is like making that switch. It's very, very difficult to do. And drawing from reference to me a lot of times is like trying to do both things. Like I can analytically copy the reference. I've trained my eye well enough to look at something and make the thing look, lay it out, use the reference. But I don't feel like I'm doing. I don't feel like I have any. Like what you just said, no ability to like manipulate it. It's like I lose that. Maybe it's like I don't have the confidence to try to manipulate it because I see it and it's right. Like, okay, that's the way the bird looks, and then I'm scared to change it because like if I change it, it doesn't look like the bird anymore.
Right.
Whereas if you flip that on its head, draw the bird, and then just fact check it against the reference, it's much more authentic, right?
Well, like you said, you know how to draw when you were doing your seminar. You know how to draw a bird, a basic bird. You have a basic idea what a crow looks like. I think it was a crow.
Yeah, raven. Yeah.
Yeah, you just draw what you think it looks like from your memory. Bring the reference back in, make the few little tweaks, and then you have what you need. Yeah. But yeah, and don't get it wrong. Like Nick spends 5, 6, 7 hours just drawing, just sketching some of this stuff. So it doesn't come super easy to him. So I think if you or I really put in that effort of trying to do that, we can do that.
Yeah.
But I find that I can get way more creative when I don't have a picture in front of my face.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like how do you find reference for I call them interleukins, for these things that have 6 eyeballs and 2 arms hanging off the side of them, or whatever. It's like I can use reference for the hands, I can use reference for the eyeballs, but all the other stuff has got to come from that creative side.
Yeah, absolutely. But then it also, I think, takes, like what I mentioned, I used you as a reference in my seminars, that you're inviting people into that world. In order for them to believe that story, they have to be able to relate to something visually. You need a visual kind of consistency, sure. Right? So like I use the what's it called, fisheye. Like you kind of have like one eye's kind of bigger, or 3/4 kind of. A lot of the stuff that you do, it looks like it can all live in the same space, but you have to you have to be able to pull off a certain level of believability So a lot of times the reference is super valuable in your studies and developing the skill set that you need to be able to pull that off.
Right.
It's just that, once you understand how light kind of reveals form, makes it a whole lot easier to put the reference away and start to
Sure.
build it completely on your own.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that a lot of artists need to do if they want to get super abstract is they got to lead their audience outside of the box, right? So I didn't come out the cuff just drawing weird shit and everybody's like, I want that. It's like my fan base started off seeing me do realism. They started off seeing me do normal cartoony work, and then I just slowly started tweaking it more and more and more. And I probably lost some of that fan base, and I probably gained some fan base in the process. But the meat of my fan base probably took that journey with me. Because if you've seen my work now and you didn't know anything about my past or anything, you might be like, what the fuck? Like, why do people even like this? But then after people have followed that journey, then I think it's easier for them to understand and enjoy it. Same thing with Picasso. Like when you see Picasso's shit, you're like, fuck this. Yeah. But then you realize when he was 15, he was drawing better than all of us combined. Yeah. And then you have a little more respect for him because you can see that he made that path. That journey was the important part. Yeah. I think that era of fine art, you have so many, whether it's abstract expressionists or whether it's like impressionists or any of those folks, and you look at the work that they do and you're like, I don't really care. And then you look at some of their still life work from when they were, earlier in their careers or whatever, pencil drawings, and you're like, holy shit. Like, and then you start, that's when you question yourself, because you're like, well, shit, they draw better than me. What the hell made them start drawing like cubes of blue or square like that, or whatever it was? It's just like, I don't get it. What were they trying to explore? Well, and you were saying in your seminar about just trying to bare bones it, like simplify everything. And I find myself slowly getting there too, where it's like, how can I use less colors and less shapes and still communicate the exact same image? For multiple reasons. One, the tattoo is going to be a lot clearer, and the tattoo is going to probably hold up better because I'm not fading 15 colors into one. So it's like when you see somebody like Picasso, he's just the simple basic parts of that piece and tweaked out a little bit. Yeah.
I do love that that idea of how little information can I get away with sharing for people still to get the point. Right. I think it's like whenever the way that you compose a lot of things where you don't necessarily need, like, your backgrounds become almost kind of like faint and silhouetted, and then the foregrounds maybe you'll turn in a way where you only see a few of the features of the character. Where of course you're showing embedded characters, which is a little bit different than the way that I might do it. Like, I use the Raven reference where it's like, do I have to show both wings of a bird, or both? How much of a bird do you need to know what kind of bird? Like, what are the things about a raven that make it look like a raven? It's probably that beak with the tuft of hair and like the color of it, and maybe kind of how its head attaches to its body. And then it's like, well, now I've got a story I can tell about it. It doesn't have to be like a narrative, but like now I've got a story about a raven. This this raven is oversized. He's looming. He's oversized. He's like right up. He's right in your face. He's so in your face that you can't even see most of his body. It's like. Then so that's why I guess sometimes with this illustrative thing, I'm kind of meandering in where I want it to go. I don't care where it goes necessarily, but it's like I like the idea of seeing something and wondering what the world is about. If I look at your piece, especially some of the illustrations that you had done for was it album covers, or with the with like where they're plugging the information into the folks' minds and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff I absolutely love, because you start to kind of invent your own narrative about what's actually happening. But then sometimes someone can just paint, like, I don't know, one of these plants outside, and rather than rendering every leaf, maybe like the bright green leaves are just like a mark that goes this way, and the other leaves are a sideways mark that are like darker and less saturated, and it describes that plant perfectly with seemingly little effort. That's like another way to tell a story.
Yeah, I love that stuff. You ever heard of Greg Manches?
Oh yeah, holy shit!
I took a class with him, and he was
really.
The only thing he was looking for is how can I make the most impact with the least amount of brush strokes. Yeah. And he just kept on kind of getting less and less, bigger brush,
Yeah. Man, those polar bears are absolutely crazy.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's cool. Most people don't know.
Yeah. He's got I have one of his books, the one with that crazy, I think that painting is called Above the Timberline. You won't have to look it up. We're gonna put it in here. It's so good, man. Like, there's a YouTube.
That piece specifically. He did a long time ago too.
Yeah.
He probably did that 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's so. It's so cool. He's got a couple of YouTube videos just over his shoulder making some of those paintings too that are awesome. That's
ahead.
Yeah, that's super cool that you got to. So when did that happen? How long ago and where were you?
You ever heard of the Illustration Academy?
Mm-hmm.
So took the Illustration Academy and he was one of the teachers.
Okay.
And Gary Kelly and Anita Kuntz and who else? Sterling Hunley and I don't know if you know these guys, John English.
I know a couple of those names, but Greg's the only one.
C.F. Payne, you know who that is? He used to do the back of the Reader's Digest magazines. You know, I know because my grandparents had it. It's by the toilet.
Yeah. So going through something like that with Greg Manchester, what do you bring back? Can you think of anything that you bring back to your work from that, literally, or?
I mean, it's. I know I haven't. I feel like I'm not capable of doing it yet. You know, and that's the goal for me is to, you know, when I work. You saw some of my abstract art that I was doing, and that to me is way more entertaining than my fully rendered stuff. Hence the fact that we started getting into making it feel like a human's behind it. To me, the marks are super interesting. Once you see the candy image, you see a little pink bunny, and it's super happy, blah blah blah. And you're like, ooh, cool. That's like that quick happiness. But those ones that you can look at every time and you see something different, and that's, to me, those are the long-lasting pieces of art, are the ones that you can stare at for a long time. They're not like the candy type art, you know. And I like the candy art too. I mean, and it does really good on Instagram. Yeah. But you know, I also like the fact that my clients are like, yeah, man, I've been looking at this tattoo for years, and I still didn't even see this thing till last week, you know. And I love that, you know. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny, you were talking about candy art and stuff that's like super rendered. And in the talk, there was a little Q&A going on, and you were talking about how things like Pixar kind of like boards you of perfection in art, because it became, you know, you can generate it with a computer, and when the leaves are blowing and the light changes like it really would in the real world, and it's like, man, nobody actually did. I mean, somebody did it, but not in the traditional way that we're thinking. Yeah. Do you think about people like Mark Ryden? Who do you know Mark Ryden's work?
Of course.
So who do, I mean, you would call that like candy, you know, very well rendered kind of candy stuff. And I wonder what makes this, I've been to a couple of his shows in person. First off, I guess he has a real classical approach. Like he's actually a great painter. He's not
technique is awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Yeah. And then probably also with all the symbolism and just all of the stuff that he packs in.
With him, I would say that he does have the candy aspect. You see the little girl's face, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you kind of work your way around the composition. It was like a meat dress, and you're like, oh, what is that? And then there's like 15 different types of meat, and then there's a little bunny over here. So it's not like, when I think candy tattoos, it's usually like one image. Here is a bunny, you know, and it's like, that's it. There's nothing else. Whereas like if you can have the bunny, but then have a bunch of other stuff to kind of work in there that maybe you don't see right off the bat. So the candy is good to bring you in, but then having more to it. So I feel like the candy tattoos are a little more shallow, and then you've got the, you know, full composition piece with all the extra stuff. Yeah. And the little mark makings or whatever. So.
Right. And that's where, and Teresa was the first one in this series early on to bring up how important she felt like backgrounds were in work, and how she thinks if there's one thing that most tattooers could work more on, it's in their backgrounds. And yeah, when she said backgrounds, I was thinking, you know, environments, like just making it. And so yeah, that's a big difference between a candy piece and something like, well, one of the differences, there's a lot of differences between most candy pieces and what Mark Ryden does. Sure. Between what everyone does, what Mark Ryden does, really, he really has his own thing going.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. Yeah. But I'll also say this, like I went through a phase of no backgrounds when I first started, because backgrounds weren't really prevalent. And then I probably went through 10 years of doing like crazy backgrounds on everything. And then I slowly started paring that down, and now I'm at a point where a lot of times if I do background, it's super minimal, because I want that image to read quickly, especially on a sleeve. It's like, you only have this much surface to communicate. If you put, you know, a lot of background on there, then your image gets this much bigger or this much smaller. So I've kind of started moving in the opposite direction. If I do a background, it's very subtle, very not grabbing your attention so much. But I might do a little silhouette of a butterfly angler bat in the background or something like that, and the person maybe won't see it until they've looked at it for a while. So
yeah. So you just felt like things were getting too complex, too busy for a while?
Yeah, and also the time. You know, I was spending 60 hours on a sleeve on a bunch of stuff that, was making the piece super, like, not muddy, but like just super busy. And it was taking away from the visual impact that, with a tattoo, a lot of times you're walking down the street, you only get 30 seconds to look at that piece and then it's off, So you want these people to you don't want a big, busy sleeve going on there because you decide to put all the grass in there and all that stuff. So, choosing your spots and choosing, when you're doing a neck to knee back piece, getting background on there is not a problem because you've got a big flat canvas. When you're doing a sleeve, it's like, you can put a little background back here or something like that. But I don't know. That's just me trying to simplify a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think, there are probably dozens of ways to pull that off. I completely agree. I think you need to I'm always paying attention when I have pieces that are in progress and they walk in the morning, they're like putting their lunch in the fridge in the back room, my client or whatever. And I constantly try to glance at them, like not look at the piece, but glance at the piece as if they were like reaching in the beer cooler at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And just like, would that catch my attention?
Right.
And if it's not, why not? Like, from that angle, when he reaches in, I look at the back of his arm, like there's nothing interesting happening right now.
Sure.
And so I think sometimes I think you can get away with doing a lot as long as you're able to check yourself and be like, all right, step back and look at this thing. Maybe I can put a lot of background in, but do all muted blues from we're saying from a 3 to a 6 value range. And then then it reads as a soft background surface, everything in front of it reads forward. And then maybe you can look later and say oh, look, there are some little things in there that are still very subtly offset from each other.
Well, that's kind of the way I lay out compositions in general nowadays. It's usually one dominant character, maybe 2 or 3 supportive characters. And then I might get in the background and play a little bit, but I always try to make sure there's one visual point of interest, and then it pulls you into the composition. Yeah. So for example, with sleeves, I used to do like character here, character here, character here, character here. Now I focus on all of this first, and then I see how much space I have left to kind of play around on the inside there. And sometimes it'll just be background up here.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to see that unless you're sitting there like this. Yeah. But that kind of makes sense in there, but it's not getting in the way of this. So for example, dragons, you're not going to do a dragon head here and then the body here, do the dragon head here and maybe a claw here, and then the body kind of whips around. And you in your mind know that that's body whipping around in the background. You don't need all the details and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a perfect kind of example too. I started just last week before we left. I started a new dragon, and I ended up having to draw a good bit of it on, and just trying to play with the body. Obviously I know what the head is, and I know what the claws and stuff are, and I'm playing with the body kind of coming forward and back into space. And as I'm kind of drawing it with marker, my client's like, I'm just trying to figure out what direction he's coming from and where he's going, and she's like, does he go back this way, and then he comes out from here, and I'm like, I have no idea right now. I'm just kind of looking at what the shape's like. I just kind of want a shape to pull out onto your bicep because that looks like a cool spot for it to pop out. If it all falls back in the distance, nobody cares. It just needs to look great from right here and great from right here. And who cares if it actually lines up right? I don't know.
Yeah, and your brain will put it all together. We're using, I think we were using, movie and music analogies at one time where you look at someone like J.J. Abrams. He never shows you the full character, the monster or whatever. You always see just pieces of it. And then your brain puts it together. If you saw that full character, it would be boring.
Right.
You're like, that's a lame character. But you start creating these things. And I think the same thing with a tattoo. It's like, we know this is a dragon. Now, can we get the rest you'll just put together in your head? And you can actually probably make it cooler than what I could have drawn,
Yeah. Speaking of the sleeve thing, Andy Chambers has an interesting way that he thinks about how things sit, and he talks about I think he calls it the point of termination, or he has some term for it, but basically from the back of the armpit to this, he's like, that's really if you think about the back of the armpit, it leaves the whole tricep on this side and the whole bicep on this side. So if you think about that line at the back of the armpit all the way down to here, that's where everything should kind of terminate, because almost never do you see that.
Right. True.
And so right, yeah. So I started using that after you brought that to my attention. I was like, I always think about how they whip in, but I kind of would wing it. I never had a definitive line of where I believed that it was. But
when I used to do backgrounds, I would do these kind of like these crooked horizon lines like this.
Oh yeah.
And it took me a while to figure out. I mean, after a couple sleeves, but I would actually run it, and then of course it would come
Run
down
down.
like this. So then I had to like do a tube back up if I wanted the horizon line to work on all sides and not run down the arm. But that was the other thing that I started to learn too, was trying to create perspective on an arm. It's super difficult. I mean, especially if you're doing like normal force perspective, where it's like the upper part is typically further away and the hands in your face or whatever. If you try to do that, it doesn't work because this is the thinner part of your arm and this is the bigger part. So you almost have to do reverse force perspective, where the big part's coming from here and this is going back in the distance.
It's a tricky thing. And the thing is those types of ideas, I think probably the vast majority of the people who watch the show haven't really. It's a lot to think about. There are so many other challenges. Just in making tattoos that so many people, it doesn't even occur to them that they're thinking about a perspective looking at a sleeve at all.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying the other day about look, if it's above you, looking above. I never thought about that before, but that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a legit rule, but it's a way of looking at it that's super interesting.
Yeah. I think particularly if you want to give yourself a starting point where you can just start drawing. You know what I mean? Just like set a few rules for yourself where you don't have like every option in the world to start with. I don't do well with every option in the world to start with.
Yeah. And those rules are your style, right?
Right.
If you do that, all the time, and I have my little rules for flow and stuff like that, and certain colors I like to use versus not, and that makes you feel a little more comfortable because you got this little place to stand. And you go to Baskin Robbins, let's say you can only have one flavor, and you got to choose from all these. It's like, fuck.
Yeah, exactly.
3 scoops, please.
Yeah, that's right. That's a lot. And then to be fair, that kind of looking down perspective is another thing that I took from Andy. That was his idea. Yeah. I was like, oh, crazy. Yeah. And he was mentioning about in our advanced sleeve design workshop that we did by kind of inventing a horizon line so that you would have a place of work, look up and then to look down. And then I was thinking like, but like for the whole body, that works so well. Even if you're doing like a one-off piece, drawing it from that vantage point, where like, if it's down on your leg where you're looking down at the tattoo, like, that works for like head to toe. And that, even if it's not one design with a horizon line, even if you're just designing like individual like one-shot pieces, it'd be cool to like say, all right, these pieces are drawn for lower legs and these pieces are drawn for shoulders because of how I'm looking at it.
I mean, that was a great thought process there. I think it's interesting. I think instead of calling this the illustrative series, you should call it the Virginia series.
Yeah, it's looking that way. I know it. It's crazy.
I mean, we got some great artists.
Yeah, no doubt. Absolutely. Well, I know you're going to have to wrap up soon, I know, but something I wanted to hit on is the idea of like people understanding the story. And of course, with your characters, the way that you're thinking this thing through and this kind of invented reality and stuff like that, there's not really necessarily a narrative or a message that you're trying to get across to the viewer, not to the wearer of the tattoo, or is there? I mean, if I'm thinking about like Teresa's stuff, if she's doing like I've been asking everyone at the end to choose a piece that really worked well from a storytelling standpoint and describe it. Yeah. And I'm trying to think that one. Teresa's was like a Red Riding Hood that was no, it wasn't. It was a werewolf. A she-wolf. Yeah. And so she was very clear about the way she placed things so the narrative would be like kind of readable. She wasn't super concerned about whether the person got the same meaning that she intended. Nick, on the other hand, Baxter has a lot of like social, political type of views, and when Baxter, when he put together an illustrative style kind of tattoo that had a narrative, is pretty important for him to explain the narrative. He wants them to get it. Yeah. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
It's all over the place. I find there's times where I want to give them that path from point A to point B quick. But then there's also the J.J. Abrams type thing where it's like, the more information I give them, the less interesting it could be. Whereas like if I get them to make it up in their own mind, sometimes it'll be better than what I could have come up with. So I found that sometimes I've come up with tattoos and I haven't said anything about them, maybe just like a little cute story or whatever. And someone's like, man, I like the way that you put this, and this together to make this. And I'm like, man, I don't fucking think about that, man. But I do like a lot of my stuff I do in insinuate certain directions to kind of push people in that. Sometimes there's not even an end to that. Like, for example, with Carcass, some of these stories are kind of open-ended, kind of like Lost per se, which is another J.J. Abrams. I'll say, this guy was the king of this specific area until ... and then later on down the road, I might bring another character in and be like, oh, that would be a good one to finish the story. This was the guy who took over the throne of that particular environment or whatnot. Yeah. But I like the fact that it sparks interest too. If you just spoon feed everyone everything they need to see and hear right from the get-go, you leave no room for interpretation, which, kind of doesn't stimulate any sparks,
Yeah. Have you ever, if I assume that there are at least chapters in a lot of these stories, have you ever gotten the people who wear these tattoos together to photograph or do any?
No, I haven't. I mean, and the thing is I've been, almost every tattoo I've done since 2008 is part of Carcass. So getting those people together would be tough. I mean, I've tattooed maybe 1,000 people since then, Right. I mean, that's 11, 12 years. So. Yeah. But yeah, I'm actually creating a website right now. It's carcass.com, and it has the map on it, and then I've got little pins that you can click. It's not completely, you can't do it right now, but this is what I'm in the process of doing. And you click on the pins and you can see the character. Some of them I've drawn, some of them are just sketches, some of them are tattoos, and I'll just clean them up so that they look good there. Yeah. But I want people to be able to go around this world and read little stories and see all this stuff. So I don't know what I'm doing right now, man. I'm just creating fun stuff and trying to put it all together. Yeah,
that's awesome. Can you think of a piece that maybe we could feature that really like you discovered something on, or the narrative that would relate to the conversation at all, where like a narrative was either like, I know when we were talking to Andy, he was talking about finding things in tattoos that made them exceptional to him. And he's like, sometimes I'll discover a little thing at the end that like really made that tattoo exceptional, but it wasn't intentional. It wasn't, most of the time it wasn't planned. You ever?
I would say that, a lot of the times when my tattoos have gone viral per se, it wasn't always the tattoo I thought that would, so I would say that, there's some of them you just know, because it's big, some people are going to like it because it has a, swinging dick, people are going to like it. Right. But I will say, and this might not line up exactly what you were asking me, but the big blue bodysuit that I did, that was the beginning of everything. Yeah. So that was where I really put that effort in. And that took me, I think it was 3 years to do that tattoo, 4 years to do that tattoo. And it was, that was the beginning.
Did you work on that piece the first time we met in Eugene? Is that
No, that was another one.
Okay.
I don't think I put that in my seminar, but that was actually the where I was drawing that butterfly bat, the purple butterfly bat, and I went through the process. That was part of that piece.
Okay, gotcha. Sweet. Well, cool. I know you got to get y'all. So Richmond, you're hoping next year?
Richmond Convention, it's going to be the third weekend of October in 2022.
Sweet.
Yeah. Hopefully we get all this stuff tightened down, man.
Knock on wood. I hope so.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. Well, sweet, man. I really always appreciate you taking time. Always enjoy the conversation.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can do it again. I'm so happy to do one of these in person. I'm so sick of looking at the screen.
Yeah, I guess we're supposed to do one of these at least once a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fireside.
Richmond next year.
Fireside alumni. Man.
That's right. No doubt. Cool. Sweet. All right. Thanks everybody for supporting what we do. We'll see you next time. Make sure that you check out all the replays. Jesse's seminar is available on the Reinventing the Tattoo website, and we're gonna go in and try to clean it up and make it shorter and sweeter. Not shorter, cut out breaks and stuff like that. So stuff like that. So make sure to go and check it out, and you can stream it for eternity, for as long as we have the internet at least. So take it easy. Illustrative tattoos. Illustrative tattoo.